It's October, and I'm doing nothing but scary movies this month. But first off, what is the best found footage horror film? Comment below.
The normally tranquil setting of Ararat's Norval Dam was shattered yesterday with the disappearance of 16-year-old Alice Palmer while picnicking with her family.
Lake Mungo is a 2008 mockumentary, but it doesn't actually mock anything. I don't know. It's the only term I can think to give to it. Follows the events that unfold after a 16-year-old girl drowns on a picnic and the family are left dealing with the grief.
I'd woken up, but I didn't want to open my eyes.
So, as I've said before, I love films that blur the lines between fiction and reality, and this one does that perfectly. This is the second time I watched it, and after I had to go check again just to make sure it wasn't a real documentary, because it's put together so well in that way. I think what distinguishes it from most mockumentaries is that it doesn't seem to sort of follow a script. It's not very it's not structured perfectly. It's not structured perfectly like something like Catfish.
And there are those people who are catfish in life.
That has every sort of beat going in it works. This doesn't have that, and it doesn't affect the film in that sort of way. But what it does is it adds a realism to it, because it has all these sort of what Ebert would call pillow shots that show you like bits of the area that they live in, like just a shot out of a window at night and stuff like that. In the same way that David Byrne did in True Stories, it shows it's using sort of the banality of life to heighten the supernatural events in it, like in Halloween as well. It's sort of everything's so normal and relatable and real, but then there's this strange, uncanny, supernatural thing that keeps coming in and going out. And
It was only after viewing the clip several times that we realised what she was doing.
yeah, there are sort of twists and turns and plot points in there and stuff, but the way it's constructed perfectly like a documentary, like it's not, everything doesn't seem planned. It seems that they've captured that while they were there, and this was something that happened while they were there, rather than everything being perfect and fitting in perfectly and every sort of scene ending perfectly. There's a lot of like awkward silences. There's a lot of sort of dialogue and ideas that don't come out fully formed, like I've said before, and about how realistic dialogue works is like that sometimes, especially if people are grieving or stressed. Sometimes what they say doesn't make sense. Sometimes what they do doesn't make sense in this documentary, because there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, I do. I believe he saw what he saw, and he's not the kind of man to make something up.
So the acting has that realism to it, and apparently there was no actual dialogue written in the script. There was just a sort of guide, so that they were just sort of put in front of the camera, and the director's interviewing them as if it's a real documentary. So he is sort of directing the action, but there's nothing rigid there. It's just they're just letting things flow naturally, and that's how you can feel that while you're watching it. That's why I kept thinking, is this a documentary? And again, when you're thinking that, is this a documentary, you're also just thinking, is what's happening real, or not like what's actually happening in it, but are ghosts real, and do these strange things can happen in real life? Because they've been reported in other places, so it's constantly sort of messing with you in that way that, like I've said before, that the best horror films operate on more than one level, and this one's definitely doing that as well.
It was all very official and formal, and they asked me to sign a statement of identification. June stayed in the car.
So allowing the actors to improvise their dialogue like that, and not putting like a massive emphasis on what they have to say in the scene, gives you that naturalism that just lets you go with it. Because if you're watching these, not just mockumentaries but films and TV in general, I get this feeling when something's overwritten, and it just takes me out of it. I don't really relate to the characters anymore.
That's not my car. That's my boss's car. And if something were to happen to my boss's car, well, I'd get in trouble.
If everyone in it is talking the same, then all I'm hearing is the author. I'm not hearing characters. I'm not hearing real people talking. So I can't put myself in their shoes and feel their grief and the horror the way that I can in Lake Mungo.
It's a hard thing to prove or disprove.
So yeah, this is definitely one of those horrors that operates on two levels, because we come for the scares and the twists, and they are there. And we go along for the ride because of the realism, because we like these characters, we're interested in them, and because we're getting these little glimpses of life where they live as well. It paints a broader picture of just life in Australia. I've never been to Australia, so that's interesting to me. I like the characters, but then there's also, underneath the horror, this film is really about how different people deal with grief, and every character in here is struggling on. There's parts where there's sort of a twist, and it completely destroys one of them, but it gives closure to the other one, which, it's quite a complex thing, that. Which again, I think this is something that's much more common in documentaries, because they kind of have less control on what's happened, and it can become more complex than that. I don't think mainstream films do that, because it is too complex. They'll always say, like, at film schools and universities, they'll say, "Oh no, you have to have a clear hero, and you have to follow these, or you need the princess, the helper, all these. You have to have all these stereotypes in there, but they don't really exist in real life. You can edit a documentary so that you can reduce people down to archetypes, but it won't be very rewarding." And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about this, is that in between the scares, you are still engaged emotionally, and you're sort of understanding a bit more about how grief affects people. I thought that was a really smart thing to do, especially if the horror hadn't worked, but the horror does work very well. Shit me pants, I did.
I feel like something bad is going to happen to me. I feel like something bad has happened. It hasn't reached me yet, but it's on its way.
But yeah, I don't want to talk about the horror, the actual scary elements of it too much, because I feel like they're spoilers, because a lot of it sort of just emerges as the film goes on, like I said, because it's not so clearly structured that you will think, oh, there's a scare coming, or we're going here, or we're going there. Some of these things just sort of pop up out of nowhere. Ooh, scare you like that. And there was one bit that stuck with me for years since I see it. I didn't realise it'd been 12 years since this came out. That there's the one scene that still sticks with me. That's really scary for me, anyway. There's some not everyone's triggered by the same things, but I don't like when things look into the camera. So overall, great horror. The cinematography and the construction of it all, it so perfectly replicates a real documentary, not a mockumentary. It's not sort of like, we're making a mockumentary, so we have to do that and that and that. Everything's constructed in the way that is sort of natural, as if they've found it and then constructed it after. So it's kind of undisciplined, which is a good thing for a horror film, because it gives you the impression that anything can happen, but it's also so real that if it didn't happen, you would be interested and care enough about the characters to keep watching and to get something from it, to come out of it. You might come out of it with a bit more than you went in with. So Lake Mungo, definitely check it out if you like that reality blurring thing like I do, and if you want the sort of scares that aren't jump scares, that kind of get under your skin and stick with you, then you'll enjoy Lake Mungo. 9 out of 10. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll be back next week with another Reviews on Realism.